So Ivanti is now about 14 months old. The name it's only new in name. It's probably more familiar by Front Range or Heat in the past, as well as Landesk. So Clear Lake Capital, venture capital firm, came in and bought both and merged them in their portfolio to create Ivanti. So what we're looking at today in a tool that focuses specifically, on IT service management, one little aspect. But now that Ivanti has folded in Landesk, it also opens up, the world of desktop and end user management as well. Using the traditional Landesk end user management products all the way to the Shavlik patch engine and mobile device management and best of breed. So there's definitely opportunities as you expand and have requirements around desktop and endpoint management to be able to have an integrated suite into the service desk so that everything ties in nicely for reporting and dashboarding purposes, as well as just ease of administration to be able to administer those endpoints from within the service desk. There are, I should say, 15 out-of-the-box pink verified modules that are ready to go and use. So the most full-featured product out of the box of any of them out there. As Martin mentioned, there's flexible deployment options, whether you want to have this hosted, whether you want to run it on premises or some combination thereof, especially when you're talking about endpoint management, which is typically or traditionally on-prem. And the ability to have flexible licensing, both fixed and concurrent licensing if necessary. The implementation and setup is extremely easy, especially, of course, for the the hosted. The big difference, I think it was mentioned yesterday, between hosted and on-prem is having Ivanti manage the upgrades and the updates and the patches for you versus that being a manual process to download or acquire those updates and apply those if you're running it on premises. Otherwise, functionality is identical in both. There's no difference to whether you're running hosted or or on-prem, and you can easily switch back and forth. So if needs change 12 months down the road, whether budgetary needs or architectural changes that you're looking to make, the same code base can easily be moved up to the hosted or pulled down to on-premises as needed. That's it for the slides, unless there's any questions so far.
I did have one question. You mentioned there was cloud versus on-prem. Can you kind of speak to the security if it's going to be like a cloud service?
Yeah, absolutely. And the hosted environment for Ivanti is coming through Amazon. So leveraging Amazon Web Services, providing the actual platform. So all of your data in transit, between the browser and that data center is encrypted via SSL. So none of the data is sent or passed in clear text. You can manage, if you're in a hosted environment, you can manage passwords directly within Ivanti, or this is also something you could tap into your Active Directory, or if you're using some kind of a single sign-on tool to be able to pass users through automatically from your environment so that they wouldn't get prompted for that login ID or password to make it seamless.
Okay, got it. So you're leveraging Amazon, basically S3 platforms or something of that sort.
Correct. Okay. Yeah, that's where they're using their hosting services. And then Ivanti is providing the the management and the administration of the application and the platform in that hosted environment for you, so that you can simply log in via the browser and use the tool and administer the tool, but without having to maintain the platform itself.
Got it. Okay.
Now, go ahead. Was there another question? No?
Yeah, I have a quick question. I'm looking at a breakdown. Are we going to look at the different breakdowns, or are you showing us the full suite? So we know what features are available in each one.
Yeah. Yeah, so this is Ivanti Service Management. So this one's going to have the gamut loaded, but we can, I'll point out and we can talk to, what's a part of each. I think based on what we talked to yesterday, y'all were needing to be, I think, at least the service desk level to do your CMDB, tracking your assets, as well as service levels, I believe. That were at that level. The core service desk, is centered around, the basic, what is it called, the basics, like incident, problem, change, incident, problem, change, knowledge, self-service. Those are really your core 5 in the service desk. And then as you expand into, or help desk, then as you expand up, it starts adding CMDB, release management, those additional modules. But I don't think, and you can see I have, well, not as this user, but you'll see in a minute, I have a ton of different workspaces in here, a little bit different than what as workspaces in footprints. Whereas here, these workspaces that I have displayed here are really just the different modules. They're tabs that get me into knowledge or get me into incident management, but they're called workspaces. Those are all based on your user's profile. So you have different types of users. We're starting off with the self-service user, but based on that profile, that'll give them access to a specific set of workspaces that you want them to be able to get into and be able to log requests or view knowledge. So move this around here. In this self-service dashboard, my homepage is designed to show me critical information, published announcements related to outages or general information that's been published to the self-service portal, all the way to being able to view status of currently logged issues, being able to pull up those, view the items they've submitted in the past, and add updates or add information, view progress and status, or being able to browse knowledge or search for knowledge, which I can do. I've got a button I've created here to go directly there, or they can simply use the search feature and say, whoop, and say and be able to funnel them through those FAQs and how-to articles. So if there is something, and I'll probably have to just take some of these out. This is say email issues. So if there's something pertaining to that, they can easily, locate those articles, those documents, and if they're able to resolve or use one of those articles, great. If not, then they have, a bailout. You can give them, these buttons can be placed anywhere. I'll just kind of put them up in the corners. So, if they want to just simply report an issue, they can launch into the ticket form directly. If you've built templates for the common issues, they may even find something that's going to give them all the details by default. It'll automatically do a knowledge search in that case, present potential articles that may be relevant. And if, again, they can search that article, and if they're able to use that, then they can just simply click resolved, and it'll actually record the incident. We'll go ahead and close it out and just document it so that nobody has to respond, but you can report on the fact that that was done.
One of my understandings with Ivanti was, you're kind of highlighting this a little bit here, was that its flexibility in terms of forms, in terms of screens, and how those can be wrapped around certain incident objects, right?
Right.
One of the big things for us, why we're looking at solutions at this level is the ability to have this incident system being rolled out to many different departments and being able to have segregation. But there's, some of the, I think what would be helpful for the team to understand is where is there flexibility that Ivanti is bringing to the table, in terms of that experience and some of those business rules if you're able to kind of compare and contrast that to what Footprints brings to the table, it can kind of help understand where maybe Ivanti shines some of its elements, maybe where there's some of the challenges.
Yeah, I think the best way to sum it up in comparison to Footprints, with Ivanti, you're going to have I'd probably say an order of magnitude more flexibility in terms of what you can do and what you're able to accomplish with some without getting into code, without writing any scripts or coding of any kind, just through the interface, being able to accomplish all the automated approval processes and workflows, including being able to make API calls within those workflows. So being able to pass data from Ivanti to external tools and get responses back, be able to take action to create accounts in Active Directory, or be able to create email accounts through the workflow engine, being able to pass that data in and out of Ivanti. And so you've got a lot more flexibility. I'll show you some of the admin tools as one of the profiles we'll look at. With Footprints, there are limitations to that, but those are by design. So, and what I mean by that is, with the increased capability, also comes an order of magnitude in terms of admin. To be able to configure the tool and use all of that functionality is going to require more time, and you have the ability with Ivanti, because you can do literally anything and everything with it, to be able to take it all down, to be able to make a change that cripples the tool. Whereas with Footprints, with Remedy Force, Track It, some of a lot of the BMC tools, they built those packages with those limitations on them so that you cannot do anything that can take the tool down. You might create something or configure something that you don't like or doesn't work the way you want, but you're not going to do something that suddenly nobody can log in and the system won't, the services won't start. So, with that capability that you gain with Ivanti, there's also, increased, resources and time requirements to manage it. If you're, like I said, if you're going to take advantage of all that additional functionality, and also, the added dangers, of having a tool that provides that kind of capability, and making sure that the people making those changes are capable and trained to do them, because there's the potential you hit that button and publish something that breaks the system.
With that flexibility and sort of like capabilities with the workflow tool, are you able to sort of contrast that with, say, the administration that may be needed for let's just say something that was built using, say, SharePoint with Microsoft Flow? Where would Ivanti fall in relation to Microsoft's platform?
Yeah, I think Ivanti is going to be an order of magnitude easier than with SharePoint and Flows, simply because the interface has been, the administrative interface specifically is there, that's built specifically around managing, the forms and the workflows, and the service desk, and being able to use and leverage all of the structure that's already there, so that you're not having to build everything from the ground up. Most of the time, things are going to be 50, 60, maybe 80, 90% of what you need right out of the box. And so you're not having to build everything from scratch. So there's, time savings there, in that a lot of the content, for example, service catalog requests, onboarding new employees, as an example. These are all there and built out of the box with Ivanti. So this new employee form, the workflow, the Q&A, the costing, and everything is there, so that customers can implement this merely, by putting in, their department lists, their different employment types, their costs, and be able to use this very quickly without having to construct all the forms and the fields and everything that you'd normally have to build, out of the box if you wanted to roll something like this out. So,
Hey, Kyle.
Yeah.
So you did mention that there is an AD integration tool with it.
Yes, there is.
Is that just for cloud, or is that for on-prem as well?
Both. So you
Both.
can leverage your Active Directory data regardless of where you've deployed it.
Brian, I really like that. However, I'm concerned about the cloud version for that if we use that tool.
What do you mean by the cloud version? You mean if we were to go with Ivanti Cloud?
Right. Using the AD integration with the Ivanti Cloud, I'd be a little bit more concerned than having on-prem with that integration tool.
Okay. I think
I really do like that.
And that could
what we're looking at is.
I'm sorry. That could easily be set up in a batch mode too. So you could just kick your AD data out to a flat file or something, and we can come around and just pick it up, or you email it, FTP it, up to your server, and we can import it automatically versus having to tap AD directly. It wouldn't be real time. It'd be in a batch mode, but it's easily done.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And so in that way, I think when you look at the Flows tool, SharePoint form, because I talked to a lot of customers that have gone that route already, and they're coming off of SharePoint. They're looking, and primarily because they are able to take advantage of best practices out of the box. So without having to design something for themselves, without understanding the best practices. That way, again, they can make their updates and changes very easily to Ivanti and get to where they need to be and still be aligned, to best practice where applicable. They may pull out certain elements out, but with all of this content available out of the box, it's hard to be. It would take, months and months and months and months to be able to replicate this, even with the tools set up and ready to go. I mean, it would probably take a good consultant, I'd say a month, just to replicate the out of the box templates that are available here, like this new employee setup. I believe there's about 85 out of the box. And so for somebody with, knowledge and skill, it's going to take them 30 days just to get you back to this point. And that's without, putting your process in place and your automation and things like that. That's just out of the box flavor.
When you're saying that the time it takes for somebody to build it, you're saying to replicate that in a platform like SharePoint, is that what you're saying?
Oh, no, that would be, it'd probably take, unless they were very familiar with SharePoint flows, it would probably take them much longer. Now, I'm just talking about for somebody to replicate this in Ivanti. If it came blank, to get what you're getting out of the box would take a month, just for the service catalog alone. That's not other templates and the workflows and things that are there out of the box.
Gotcha. Okay, I understand. You're saying you're emphasizing the amount of pre-built content and workflows that are already in place.
That's right. Yeah. I said all of the, these forms can easily be, configured, but they can also easily just be used right out of the box like this, just by putting, you're adding your data to the system. All the functionality is there for users to be able to, page through this and make their selections, but then have an automated workflow, all your notifications and things like that. Automatically, all your approvals automatically processed, and you've got not just that, but like I said, if you look through here, everything from facilities requests, all built out of the box, HR requests like onboarding and things like that, as well as all the IT services. So these are all pre-templated, already built SLAs, ready to go day one. With Ivanti. And like I said, that's just the catalog. There's a lot of other, out of the box elements that we'll talk about, from the reports to the dashboards, and things like your incident templates and things like that. So a lot of pre-built content. Some customers could go through there and not want any of it. It's simple to delete everything and start from zero. But there's a lot of good pre-built content that you can easily leverage.
Kyle, quick question with that too. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, Nate, was that you?
Yeah, that was me. Quick question for you, Kyle. With the pre-built templates, say for example, we have a new hire. Of course, they go here and enter the new hire information. Can we use that template to set up a workflow where it'll notify the manager for approval, say for a computer or laptop or something like that for a new user be in the onboarding process?
Oh, absolutely, very easy. It could go from one approval to the next. You can have 20 different levels. The approvals can go to individuals. They can go to a group, or a profile. So anybody that's a member of that group could approve it. And you can set it up for everything from first approval to unanimous vote to majority vote, to determine what approval actually means or what constitutes approval.
Do you have any?
Yeah, go ahead.
Do you have anything in the services catalog for ADP?
I don't know if there's anything from ADP. It'd probably be under HR, I would think. I don't know if there's anything specific. Yeah, they probably, I would imagine they probably intentionally stayed away from any specific, application or service, tried to keep it more general. But again, that'd be something where you could easily just take something that's close. If it's related to ADP, maybe they're setting up direct deposit or something, and that you could, change that to be ADP direct deposit, or, just relabel it. And then again, in the workflow, you could either tap this into ADP. ADP is one that, offers, access to certain services over the internet. Because I get a lot of my payroll stubs and things like that through ADP. So they provide a lot of direct access via API. So their information could be pulled in to Ivanti in many cases. Actually, it'd be used to populate data into this form, or something happening in ADP could actually kick off a process inside of Ivanti if need be. It could, when a user goes into ADP and does something, if that needs to be logged or needs to go through some kind of approval process, then you could kick it into Sherwa or into Ivanti and have Ivanti manage the approvals and kick back the return result if needed.
This is if you're talking about an API integration, right, Kyle?
That's correct.
So
REST or SOAP.
I think maybe it's better if you can provide us a list with compatibility APIs with Ivanti. I think that would kind of help us to understand, what Ivanti can connect with.
Yeah, absolutely. We can send you some information. It's going to be, they use both RESTful and SOAP APIs. So, any SOAP or REST API we can call, as well as, if it's going to be dependent on that external tool. So Ivanti can make and receive REST and SOAP API calls. It's down to, that tool that you want to tap into. What is its capability to make and receive API? What does it expose that Ivanti can use, whether it's for putting data in or querying data out? But there are documents that we can provide you that, kind of detail how that's used. And because it's really with those two, as long as your external tool supports either SOAP or REST, we can communicate with it. It's down to, what are those methods that vendor exposes that we can actually use.
So the API, is it mainly through web service type?
Yes.
Process?
Yep.
Okay.
Service both the SOAP and REST.
Okay. I had a different question. Is it possible to show us how certain departments can see certain tickets? So for example, you have like the facilities up there, and then separated with IT incidents.
Right.
Is there a way to show that here in the demo? So if I log in as a IT technician or even a customer agent, and I'm going through say like the tickets, and then looking through the knowledge base, can that be separated, from facilities, for example?
Yes, and you would separate it by these profiles, right? When I log in as a self-service user, I get access to this portal and my end user data. If I'm logged in as a analyst working on the service desk, then I've got access, to a different, set of a different dashboard in this case that gives me access to, any tickets that are, assigned to my profile. But then if I've got other, facilities users, HR users, those would be other profiles that are logging in and using the tool. So if they're, in a different group entirely, maybe they're the service desk manager. So now they not only have access to be able to see, tickets assigned to them or to their team, they can see other teams and other groups, assignments and tickets to be able to track, ownership and, quantities. So each different group that you have, your HR staff, your HR customers or facility staff, each one of those will have its own profile. And based on that profile, that will grant them, access not only to the workspaces you want them to have access to, but it controls then what data, what scope of information they can see when they're actually querying and, viewing data on the dashboard. So you'll go through as a part of your implementation and kind of define all the different groups, that are going to be using the tool, whether it's by department or whether it's by, role, you see here, so that you can use those roles to assign permissions as to what can they see, what can they get access to. Certain things you're going to want to lock down, records you want to lock down, certain tools. Right? Reporting is a prime example in here. There's only one role in here that can actually create a report, and deal with reports, and that's this report manager. Nobody else has this access and can see these reports except for that one profile. Now they can't get into incidents or anything else. All they can do is build reports and build templates of reports. But by using those profiles or those roles that are assigned, you can lock everything down to a specific feature, as well as being able to lock down certain records. And for those, I think Damon mentioned yesterday, that could be based on who owns it. It could be based on the category. Some people may only need to see desktop incidents. Other teams need to deal with just network incidents. So you can base that division line that you want to set based on any field within that incident or that asset or whatever it is that you're trying to separate, between these roles.
Did you show us the guest view? Say a user just goes to the help desk. Did you show us that view yet? Because if you haven't,
that's the first one where I submitted the self-service of the new hire request.
So okay, I see.
This is the end user portal here, based on in that role. So this is what the
I must have missed that. Okay, I see it now.
Versus somebody in IT, right? So then they have access to be able to, see all their incidents, their tasks, and then their, team's incidents, and then down here I've got everything high priority. So you can define, what queries you want on the dashboard or on their homepage, as well as control what kind of additional dashboards might they have. So I might have a different dashboard that I can dive into specific to service requests that I want, separated out from incidents and tasks. So you can either put it all on one, or you may give them access to different dashboards and allow them to flip back and forth depending upon what it is they need to dive into. Now,
okay,
here.
So the separation is pretty granular in terms of when you're talking about service roles, and also what they can see, what type of incidents they can see, as well as the knowledge base and down to the reporting level.
Yes, anything and everything. So, if you want to separate tasks or incidents or requests, down to individual fields. So you may, share an incident record with another team or group, but that team or group that you're sharing with may see an entirely different set of fields than what you view when they look at that same record. So passing from you to another team, you allow them to see that same record, but on their form that they look at, they may see, 50 different fields of information based on their role or their profile than what you see when you open up that record on your side. Now, as a staff user, when I log in, I can use these dashboards to pull up and retrieve, like my new hire request, to be able to see everything from, the service level targets that are assigned, where we are in that process. I can review all the submitted details. Here's where, you're going to, set up approvals. This is where you have your approval items listed, so that you could, actually approve right here in the interface, or they could do it via email. And then via the template, things like this, again, it automatically will create those tasks based on user selections. So this is part of, that content again, so that when they submit the new hire request, there's actually a process and task assignments, that go out, notifications that get created, so that, without having to develop all these workflows and these processes yourself, which you see up here at the top, I can actually view what that workflow is. This will show me kind of what my process looks like. Now from here, it's a view only window because I'm not an administrator, but this allows me to see, what kind of steps we're going through. And you'll notice an approval step is one of those steps that you can, easily add to your process. These items that I have available over here on the side, this is where, Ivanti expands on the capabilities of what Footprints is capable of, by giving you the ability to tap into, there's that, LDAP sync that I mentioned. So, pulling in the Active Directory information, being able to tap into the IPCM as your voice switch integration, so you can do screen pops from your phone switch. And the ability to drag and drop a workflow like this together, but have this out of the box. So again, if you start with this, and if you want to insert the approvals, it's a matter of taking those elements and putting it in between the right parts of the steps, to be able to make it yours and add those approvals to it without having to construct all of this from scratch. Now, you can also use the what they call quick actions to build all kinds of, these are like macros, and again, something that's rather unique to Ivanti is the ability to define these macro actions, so that if there are things that users are doing on a regular basis that take any more than 2 or 3 mouse clicks, you can create a quick action, a quick step for them, so that rather than having to click on that tab and create that new entry, they can have these quick links over here, so that if they need to add a note, for example, it can automatically click that tab and that button for them and pop them open to this point, so they can simply enter in their details. Maybe if I spent time working on this, do I want the end user to see this or not, and then my notes, so that I can easily go in and make that update or add that action to the ticket without having to, like I said, go through the steps of having to go through and say, okay, I want to make a new note, and click on that tab and get to this point. I can automate as much of this as I can in advance, so that I can bypass all those steps. And if I even knew that they all needed to be published and they were all going to be, email source, then I could have that ready to go as well. So that's a nice way within Ivanti that you can take any action or activity that you would typically be performing, and be able to take those actions automatically. And we'll see another example of that here if I look at my email ticket that I submitted a little earlier. So let's look, here we go, there's my email request. So when I look at my incident form, a little different than the service request, and I've created some of those quick actions and exposed them via buttons up here at the top for things like taking ownership. So if I want to grab ownership of a ticket, there's a button that'll allow me to do that in a single step versus potentially having to go in and select the team and then selecting the user on that team or selecting my name. I've got a simple button to perform that action for me. You also have your assets and that CMDB integrated into your request and your incident and problem and change modules, so that if you want to relate or tie a specific device to your incidents as you're logging in, and you can record that and have access to details like this to help troubleshoot.
Now, you mentioned about connecting a device to an incident, right? What information is included in the service desk product, as it relates to devices or equipment? And at what point would you need to bolt in the other sort of asset management module or solution?
Well, the only reason you would want or need to bolt on the CAM solution or any kind of external tool would be to automatically discover. So and let me flip gears here. Let me flip to let's go to my configuration manager where I have access. And you'll see here, this user has access to that CMDB, to be able to look at those items. And this will show you, for the different types of devices, say for a desktop computer. Let's take this Exchange server. When I select that device, these are the out-of-the-box forms, that can either be, so you can go through, you can either go through and populate these manually, so I can just hit new up at the top, say I want to create a brand new computer system, and I'm just going in and typing all the details myself, IP address, everything I want to record and document. The added benefit of having a solution like CAM or be SCCM or whatever tool that's doing automated discovery is we can, via those APIs, take and pull that data in, so you're not having to fat finger in IP addresses and MAC addresses and asset tags and things like that. If they can be automatically discovered, then those records will simply be created in this CMDB for you, and this information would just be visible based on that daily synchronization or however often you're syncing that data.
Can you export that to an Excel sheet? Oh, sorry.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's a great example of where you could create a quick action to do just that. And you may have an action that says export data to Excel, so that you could take a record one at a time and export it as need be, or you could export it off of that list page. Where you'll see
click on the CI map button under that one.
So this shows you the relationships between the assets used for troubleshooting, as well as things like change analysis, impact analysis. So it'll actually allow you to relate devices to each other so that you can visualize and view those relationships, as well as any outage information that may be out there, so you can see what kind of history it has.
Can you drill into the device, and then would that give you more information?
Yeah, for any one of these. So if you want to take a look at the computer, for example, or these, I can drill and look at those associated incidents. I can drill into detail down here. Yeah. So you see it shows me the different types of records that are linked to it. Drill into that, and you can view the same thing for the hosts or the other items by clicking on those, and it'll bring out each different type of device or type of item will have a specifics form. So this one has different data that gets tracked around, like version, for example, for an application versus IP address or MAC address.
Can you drill into a more detailed level of the ticket itself after opening up the device that you're looking at? How you had that list?
Yeah. So you can go from that list. So if I wanted to take a look at one of those, I'd just click on that, and it would show me, that specific incident.
Oh, that's great. So we can actually see the history for that too.
Yeah, and that would show from this list as well. So any incidents that are out there will be shown here. Any problems will be shown here. Changes. So that's all of your. This is all of your, asset history. Right here, all the related records. And when you're integrating in with things like, the endpoint management, desktop management, that's where this will actually allow you to interact with them. Everything from, remote controlling to pushing agents out to machines, to doing inventory on demand, things like that, so that if you are tied in to that endpoint management tool, then I can, actually do something with this device, remote control into it or something like that, directly here from the service desk.
Great, got it.
And again, all the different types of forms, like for the applications, for the computers, these are all the out-of-the-box versions. You can configure them according to your needs, but if not, all it would take is an import of your existing data, or hooking it into that external tool, and you're ready to go with populating and managing those assets, as well as being able to, the CAM tool specifically focuses a lot around software. So being able to track software licensing and things like that within Ivanti in an automated fashion. So I have the potential to be able to help you with software licensing and be able to report on that, and incidents and problems and changes all in one location.
And then this demo, is it out of the box right now, or do you have other modules that's attached to this service desk?
No, this is just Ivanti. This is the service management. So there, but we haven't talked about any of those service management specific components.
Okay, yeah, because one of the things we were looking for was actually some kind of asset, logging and tracking, and so it does seem like it does have some kind of supported feature out of the box for the service desk.
Absolutely.
So that's good. Yeah.
Yeah. So this, you would have configuration items in the CMDB at that service desk level. Yes.
Okay.
Now let me go back here to analyst. We dove in there to look at the assets real quick. I want to dive back here and talk a little bit about. You can see down here, it's logging my journals for me. Everything from manual entries that I make to automated notifications that are being sent out to staff and customers. I mean, so that gets automatically documented, so you can see the audit trail of what's happened up to this point. Now up at the top, this is where you can also integrate this into problem and change. So if I need to move this up the ladder, that's where I can create that quick action to automatically pop me into my problem form, where I can put all my details in, fill out things like the category. So we'll say software issue. And of course, maybe even go ahead and assign this to somebody on that problem management team, so they can start looking at it and be able to take that and push that into a problem automatically. And down here at the bottom, I'll be able to. I've got some tabs hidden, but if I want to show them, then it'll show me that linked problem, down here at the bottom, and I can actually go to it from here if I want to look at the details for it. So it's brought over everything from the service that it's related to. It's brought over the asset that was related to the incident. But now I can go through and work on and respond to this problem all the while being able to see and, record all of the incidents that are related to it so that I can manage, if there's other calls out there, if there's other issues that were created earlier, maybe related to that, I can go and make sure that everything gets linked appropriately, for the sole purpose of, when I go through and I resolve this issue, I come up with some great resolution. And we'll see down here, once I figure out what that resolution is, you want to have the ability to take it and push it into a change. Or, before we do that, maybe we want to, resolve it. Or I can actually, take that issue, automatically update my users via email that we've got a resolution, and then be able to push it into, a change request, for example. So let's see here, I shouldn't have. Moved it out of here. Let's just do it down here at the bottom. Thought I had a quick action for it. We'll create it here. So I'm going to expose my change tab. And here's where I can take this and say I want to, create a new change where it pulls my problem information forward. Brings over my description, details like that. Here we'll say this is related to incidents, and so it's going to resolve incidents and problems that we're dealing with. Put in all the other details to be able to create a change that can now be put through approval and assessment processes. So now I can view the change, and it's carried the asset forward, where now I can go through and put in everything from my backout plans and rollout plans and things like that. I can build them into my form. I can attach those, as hard copies. I expose my attachment page, and I can just, link that file or whatever it is directly to it. That has the backout plans and rollout plans, so that can be done any number of ways. As well as be able to put this, again, through an assessment and approval process. The assessments can be done, like you see here, with natural language questions. So users can simply, be asked to come in and respond to, the prompts that they're being asked, and I actually have to take ownership of this first. So let me make sure. Let's go in and set this category here. We're going to say this is a network issue. Now let's say computer. Makes more sense. All right. So now, what we want to be able to do is go in and review this. Notice up here at the top in my actions, here's where I've got my form actions here. So we're going to update status to request. You see it updates my status up here. It gives me a little bit of progress, but not much. Here's where I can show my related problem to be able to see exactly what problem's being addressed, as well as being able to see my workflow as it kicks off. I'm just going to bring up all this here for us. The related asset, all my activity, and there you got it. And most importantly, the computer system or the device that's being modified or updated for change impact analysis. Now I can bring up that same graphic to be able to show those upstream and downstream relationships, so that if there are downstream services, downstream applications from this that will be impacted, that's where you can use this CMDB data to understand the potential downsides of implementing this change if things were to go south. What would be impacted, what users, things like that. You can also take and use what's called the social board for a lot of this. So if you have a change that needs some review, or you want to communicate something out, please. And I can post this out to my team, certain groups or staff, so that that information can be shared, globally or with certain users, so that I can ask public opinion. They can click on, if they've got access, right, then they'd be able to click on that link and drive them straight into that change request where they can, do that review and look at everything. But that's a great way to be able to share information related to a change or something like that. Be able to ask questions, get answers, as well as be able to use this in general to, let's say, we are having issues. I can make a post like that, to a group or again everybody, and then be able to use that if I want to say, let's create an incident off of that post. So if somebody shares a piece of information and it's deemed that it needs to be an incident or it needs to be logged as a problem, then staff can easily do that from this post window, and you can control what these those quick actions, so that if they need to create that incident, they can do it right there. It gives them the incident number returned, and they can click on it to actually take them to the incident and look at the details. And that's something that can be shared with customers alike through that self-service portal, whether you're just trying to communicate out changes that are getting ready to occur, or whatever the case may be. Ask a question. You can easily do that. Any questions so far?
Not for the, well, when you're doing this change request, you mentioned about how you can also work it into a business rule or a workflow, right? Mm-hmm. So how does that typically get approved? Is it by email, or does the approver have to log into the system to do the approval?
Either way, you can. I can show you here. Let's see. I probably got my. Let's go to. I'm gonna log into my Gmail here. You'll see all the content coming into this mailbox. Once I change it, here we go. From my workflows, so from my emails that I'm sending, and a lot of those, are going to staff and customers. And you can see you can do formatting and provide the links to that specific record. So again, if they've got permissions, then they'd be able to click on that link and drive them right back in to be able to view that record. The same thing goes with approvals. And I'm probably kicked off somewhere in here. So they can actually just respond to an email, with approve, reject in the decision or in the response, to be able to kick that off. They don't have to log in, or they could, but they could also do it through the mobile. So all of these notifications, these are all out of the box workflow processes that you can either go in and turn off or on to control what's being sent, as well as to be able to go in and modify them if you want to add a new email to the process, or you want an approval. They can also do it through the mobile, so they may log in through the mobile device and just click. They get a little badge icon on their mobile device that lets them know they've got an approval that needs to be done. And you can have, that's what I was going to show you. You can have these, again, some templates that are out of the box that you can use that have pre-built content, so that if I'm going to do a server reboot, that creates all the details of my change, and I already had these things attached, but it goes through and identifies everything from the type of change to what it's categorized as, the description, all the details, so that you can have pre-constructed templates that you use to submit your changes, so that if you have those approvals that need to happen, maybe on one type of a change, maybe the Exchange server change, mail folder changes versus the reboots, so that you can have approvals on one and not on another, but not have to define those or create those each time. If there's a certain set of tasks and a certain approval process that needs to be followed each and every time you submit a change, then you can build that same process into all of your templates, so that you don't have to create those tasks and define that approval process each time, and have all your content already predefined.
Okay, when you get that notification or that approval, in your email, mm-hmm. It does include the details of the request, right? For say if you wanted to say like do maintenance or something.
Yeah, and you control what content you send, and you can send as much or as little information to them in that email as you want.
Okay.
Whether you want to give them.
Do they need to have? Do the approvals need to have any licensing, for that seat, or
no?
Just for technicians.
Just for your staff that are responding to approve or to do, because they can do that as well through the self-service portal if you want to allow that. So it doesn't consume a license for somebody to do an approval. Now, if they're gonna add activity and they're gonna be making notes and updates, they'll require a license for that. But they're working on something. But if they're just simply responding to an approval request or providing a decision, they won't need a license.
Got it. Okay.
Now, the third perspective or view that I wanted to show would be that of the admin, where when I log in, my homepage is a little different. You'll notice I've got, by default, my incidents, things that are assigned to me, my breach requests and things that have been escalated, things for my team, so I can keep a look, on my group. But I also, again, I've got, as an admin, I've got several different dashboards to be able to view. My primary one here just shows me, my incidents, things assigned directly to me, but I also have a report listing, so that I've got it, my, thumbs, things like a scorecard report. And this is where the reporting is, again, another order of magnitude greater than what you have out of the box with Footprints, because you're not able to get things like cost per incident, average time spent, mean time to repair, things like that, out of Footprints without having to come up with those calculations to do that. This is again an out of the box report. All it takes is logging some incidents to be able to run and get these metrics, versus having to come up with the formulas to build into that report to make all of this available. So you've got much richer reporting available out of Ivanti by default than what you're going to see within Footprints for sure, really with any tool, because these reports here are really kind of the tip of the iceberg with Ivanti. And again, there's more data here in just the out-of-the-box reports than a lot of tools provide, throughout the entire application. But with Ivanti, you've also got another level of analytics that you can get into. Now, this does require the service management component, but this gives you the ability to do more detailed breakdowns, all the way from your basic, say, service desk metrics, but with trending, which again is something difficult to get, is being able to compare last month to this month, to last week to this week, versus just snapshots in time to see whether you're getting better, or you're downslope or an upslope, as well as being able to get into more detailed analysis around services and costing, and being able to break it down into labor and licensing costs and things like that, with detail again, all out of the box dashboards and reports that are available. Financial trending, again, are costs getting better, are costs going down? Is time spent getting better? The ability to pull some very valuable information out of Ivanti without having to build a single report or dashboard to be able to do it.
I have a question. If you have a repeated incident, and then say it's out of the month it's 5 issues, and resolution is the same. So basically, it's an issue that happened before. Are you able to get that with just the service desk product, or you have to get the service management product?
No, you can get that just with the service desk. The only piece that requires a service management would be the advanced analytics. So the reports, you can get all of that, that information out of reports. The mean time to repair and all the costing information. It's just if you want to get those advanced dashboards out of the box, that advanced analytics is that service management component. But you can still get that same data out of reports. They're just not out. Those dashboards aren't represented in the out of the box reports.
Okay. All right.
And this uses SQL reporting services as the main report building tool. So for that report manager, when they actually click to go build a report, Ivanti has a link, which this runs on SQL, so it's there with it, but it'll launch them into SQL reporting services to actually build those reports, and that's what's being used to actually publish, all the reports that are here. Is these are built in SQL reporting services and simply exposed via Ivanti.
Okay.
Now, as you can see, for the administrator, not only do I have access to just about every workspace that's in the tool, as you can see, there are quite a few, but I also have one extra option that nobody else has, which is this configure application option. And this is where I can actually get into roll the tool out and configure the tool all the way from setting up the users and those the groups that are going to be using the tool, defining those roles, the different people that are going to be logging in to do the self-service portal, and the administration and the CMDB, and who belongs to each of those roles, so that you can control those permissions again. And this is where you can go in for each of those roles, like that self-service user, and there's just a little under 900 different permissions that can be configured for these different users to those what workspaces do they have access to, all the way to those object permissions, right? So being able to go in and say for different objects, what are they going to have, what do they have access to and what do they not have access to. So you can go through and find your configuration items, for example, and here's where I could go in and on a field by field basis, I may give them access to be able to see those computer systems, but there may be something that I don't want them to see, or I don't want them to be able to edit within there. So this is where you can get into all the way down to the field level, where I'm saying you may share an incident or a change or something with a group of users or give them access to it, but you don't give them access to certain fields. This is also where you set up and configure your automation. We saw before where I can open up that the workflow tool, build workflows on different components. But here, I'll actually scroll down just a little bit. Here's where I can actually go in and make a change, whereas before I only had a view window. And what it'll do is it'll actually, let me go through and right here. It'll show me by module. So if I look at my incident, for example, so here's my approval workflow. and I'll click on this, and it does versioning for me. So I can see, we've started way back on this date, and we worked all the way up to 2017, where we made the last, update. And if I want to go in and make a change, I can either go in and edit what's currently running in here, or I can say I want to add a new version, and it'll open up the existing palette for me. And in here now, I can go through and build something, that's going to be different and turn it on. If I just want to make an edit to what's already running, and I can just select that and go into edit mode, and you'll notice it'll automatically create a different version of the same. So I can come in now and I can build this up to be whatever I want. So if I want to, let's take one, I guess the incident. Oh, we got one that actually had something. This one's blank, so we're gonna grab a different one. Let's do change approval. There we go. So now I've actually got the ability to affect a change, to the workflow. So if there was another approval process I needed to add to this, I've got cab here. So if it's an emergency change, yes, okay, it needs to go to the cab. If the cab approves it, what happens? Then it goes to a notification. But maybe I need another approval in here. So that's where I can go and say I want to get another approval. I'll put it out here, and I'm going to say if the cab approves it, right? So I grab this guy. If the cab approves it, then I need to go to get another approval, and we can call this one, right, here's where I can define all my approval details, right? So percentage, majority vote, who does it go to? Is it by group? Is it specific users? Right? I can define who is this approval actually going to be generated to. So I put in all of my details for that step, and now I've got it linked out. So it's going to go from the cab now to my new approval, and we say then if they approve it, then we go back to that notification that was in there before. If they deny it, then we go to, where's my, probably down here at the bottom. Yep, my stop. So if they deny it, we may want to send another email notification in there. Maybe not. Maybe, well, that's in it right there. Denied change. And then once it's sent, now we go through the update and we get back to stop. So I can go in and make a change to that workflow, including, making that web service call, if I want to add that somewhere in there, so that I have the ability to build very complex workflows within here, but, very easily, and be able to link it in and be able to take it. And you see, I haven't put all my details in here, so we'll just go here because I'm not going to actually implement it. So you see, it helps you, once you go through without fixing all your errors. But once I've saved it, nothing's taken effect yet. That's the nice thing is I can go in and I can make an update like that, and then I can go on and do something else. I may need to come back to it tomorrow and do additional work. But in that way, when I come in, tomorrow, or maybe I even want to schedule it, I can take those changes, those updates that I make, and when I'm ready, I can take that and I can make this active at any point in time when I'm ready to finally turn that on, so that if I want to, deactivate my old one and, then reactivate my new one, you can only have one workflow, for each, specific object at a time active. So if I've got my current one, activated down here, but I want to roll back, maybe I implement something and it breaks everything, nothing's working, you can easily say, okay, turn this one off, right? I want to deactivate, my old one, and then I want to go in and reactivate, this new one, or, the previous, and roll back very easily, so that these versions can be used to get you out of trouble if you do hit a button and something doesn't perform as expected. So, right, I take my brand new one I create, and I'd say I want to activate this guy. Oh, I have to publish it. And then once let me see, I got a little button here to publish. So once I do this, whatever changes I made, they'll actually take effect. But up until this point, I can go in and drag and drop and play with that workflow and even come back to it and continue adjusting it up until the point I say publish this, and then it becomes live for everybody. That's where you may want, a lot of customers will stand up a separate instance for testing, where you can go through and you can build your workflows, publish them, test them out, make sure they're working, and then there's an import-export tool to be used. So you see I can take a workflow file from your test instance, import it into production, now that we know everything's working and testing, and I can set that up to then publish itself automatically early in the morning or late in the evening, knowing that everything should be good. But that way you can test things out and maintain a library that you can roll back to if you do encounter problems. But it's very easy to be able to work with those workflows and build up complex automation with Ivanti very quickly.
So it's only when you hit the save button that creates a version for you, right? It doesn't automatically save every 10 minutes or something like that, right?
No, you're hitting the save button. Yes. Yep.
Okay.
And it'll automatically create a new version for you, and then once you're done, you'll have to publish that one to turn off the current running.
Okay, and then you can also set permissions to certain admins to certain workflows also, right? You can do that type of security.
Well, no, for the administrative user, so for the users that are assigned to that administrative role, they'll have, you could remove something from them, but an administrator is an administrator, is the short of it. If they've got that admin license, they'll be able to, if somebody were to remove permissions from them, they could simply go back and add them back to themselves.
Okay, so the service role has to be an administrator in order to build and edit workflows.
Yes, nobody but the administrator they have to have this button to be able to get to that screen. And any other role or profile that you may create, if it's not that out of the box administrator, they'll never see that configure application link. It only belongs to that one role only.
Okay, so I'm trying to understand. So if I'm a technician myself or Nate's a technician, can you assign the service role as an admin to the technician, or it won't be possible?
You would, if you have somebody are you saying they're being both roles? Is that the question?
Correct.
Yeah, if they have more than one, then it's gonna act just like it does here. I've got dozens, so I have the ability to switch back and forth between roles. So if I want to administer the tool, I have to switch to the admin role to be able to do it.
Okay, all right.
Because that's the only way I can get back to this screen.
Okay.
So if they are part of the service desk and they're an admin, then when they log in, they'll have to pick. Do you want to log in as an analyst and have your analyst view and your analyst permissions, or do you want to log in as the admin and have the admin permissions and the admin workspaces and things like that?
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Sure. And this is also where you can, you'll find the API access here. So this is where you can, and this is actually where the documentation is stored as well. That'll allow you to understand exactly, what's possible, with that API library. What you can call out to, what you can do, how to use it. If you're writing HTTP web service code, and example scripts to understand how to implement this. But things that we've talked about, like the CAM, the asset management plugin module, and the discovery, those are specific cases that are already integrated in. So those you don't have to build APIs and web service calls for the asset management or the discovery modules. those are integrated in and just require, IDs and passwords really to use, versus something you have to build from scratch. But this is where you could set up, everything from, scheduled imports. A lot of these are out of the box, dealing with other BMC tools like that discovery tool that I mentioned. This is where you see these are out of the box, import automations, so that I can go in and turn these on, and immediately, if you're using that BMC discovery tool, it's creating all those links and relationships for you. This is this process that pulls that data in from BMC discovery, populates that asset and links, and makes it available to you. But this could be used to, create another integration to some external database, where you can go in and just tap into some external, tool, whether it's, file folder somewhere, you just need to go pick it up, all the way to specific uses, like SECM, pulling in again, where it's just ID and password, and we know everything else, and we can go grab what we need. But that makes it easy to be able to set up connections, whether you're pushing data in or pulling data out, either via those APIs or just a simple file export or import, something you can schedule but doesn't require, understanding of web service calls and API methods. So this is where, again, you have a lot of out-of-the-box integrations, both to that desktop and server management, endpoint management tool, Landesk, all the way to, SAP, tie in financial data coming from SAP. So a lot out of the box, but also general capability to be able to tap into any external tool very easily. There's your, LDAP for tying into AD that we mentioned before, where I can set up, all the connection parameters and the query, the LDAP, the ADC query that I want to run, and what fields I want to bring in.
So does out of the box, do they have some kind of scanning discovery for the assets that's on your network, or is that additional, like a third-party tool that you would have to use to integrate to the service desk?
Not third-party, but an additional. It is an additional license, so that'd be this heat discovery. So This would be the component, both agentlessly and through these agents that you can deploy, that would do that automated discovery. It's it's there and available, but the actual discovery component that utilizes this is that additional license. And we can get you cost on that if you're looking to see what the licensing is for that.
Okay, all right, understand.
Were there other questions related to integrations or admin, anything like that? You guys feel like got a good handle for the workflow capabilities?
For AD, that does not need a additional license, right? It's out of the box.
No, nothing done via API is going to require a license.
Okay.
So any connections, if you're creating tickets, for example, from some other external source or tool, you want to automatically generate tickets like Event Manager, some alarm or something like that, like an email, it's creating a ticket. You don't require a license for that. Just a user logging in to work on a ticket. Those are your only licensed users.
Kyle, is it limited to one domain controller?
No, you can tap into as many as you need. You can build that page I showed, that configuration page. You can add 2, 3, 4, 5, and pull them all in, 5 minutes apart. Set them up on different schedules, so you pull them one after the other, or kick them all off at once.
Can you completely separate them though? Say you have 2 and you can completely separate them.
Yeah, well, you mean inside of Ivanti? Yeah, absolutely. Just like you separate an incident, or a workspace or anything else, that would be a user record or user object. So you go through and filter it, based on maybe the OU or container they're a member of, which maybe, depending upon what kind of information you have in your directory, that may also populate your roles for you. I mean, I don't know kind of how your directory is laid out. But if those roles are represented, in any form or fashion in AD, then you pull the users in and put them in the appropriate role using their OUs and containers. And just be able to then, you'd still have to go in, of course, once they're there and apply the permissions and check all the right boxes for them, but you wouldn't have to create the roles or the users. Those could be populated via AD. Or,
okay, gotcha. Thank you.
Or HR database, or it doesn't have to be AD. It's an example, most common, but we can grab that from any source that is most accurate.
I had a question regarding communication between agent to agent or user to agent. Besides having to log into the portal, is there like any kind of chat, that's supported?
There is chat functionality, but not outside the portal. So they would have to hit, they'd have to log in to the portal to gain access to the chat. So
okay.
Without, even that self-service view, without, having logged in, in many cases, we don't know whether to give them access to, what to give them access to.
So for that login and access, they would have to have their separate user database, or could it bounce off Active Directory if you do the LDAP integration?
Yeah, well, okay, there's two different pieces. So the LDAP integration I was just talking about, that page, that configuration page, that's for the import of data only. So that has nothing to do with authentication. That's just tapping into AD and running an query to get that user account and profile information. But separately, you can go in as the admin and configure the authentication options. So you can authenticate against Ivanti, you can authenticate against your Active Directory, or you may have some like Ping or Okta that you want to use a single sign-on, for pass-through authentication. It supports OAuth or SAML too. So any application, identity management tool capable of passing those OAuth requests, we can use that tool for authentication to Ivanti, even if it's hosted. So if they hit Ivanti hosted, it's going to redirect the login to your AD. Your AD says yes or no, passes the result back to Ivanti in the hosted environment. Ivanti either lets that user in or not based on the response from your directory server.
Okay, gotcha.
I wanted to go back to the chat. So you're saying they have to hit the portal first, and then so within the portal, that's when they would activate the chat session, right?
That's correct. And I've got I've got collapsed over here in a window. So this is where they could go in and start that chat session. But again, it does require authentication because we have to determine, are they allowed to use chat? Who can see it and who can do what? So you can put controls and permissions around the use of chat, just like, every other object. But this is where they could add all those people to the conversation. Like you're saying, if they need to bring other users into, I don't want to do that. I'm out, clicked the wrong button. If I need to add other people to the conversation, then I can go in and add users to this. So if I want to browse and say, I want to talk to Alan about this and, a couple of different people, then this is where I can add, all of the users and be able to start a conversation, just using typical chat. All right, and then they get their chat window pop up on their side, just like this, and then they could respond and have that back and forth. And that's where you could also use those, quick action options to be able to allow them to take these and turn this into an incident if they want, or a knowledge article, anything that you feel may be of value that's going to come out of these chat sessions. That's where you can create those buttons like we saw before in the social board to allow them to use a chat just like they can that social board. So just two options.
And then can you also accept file or screenshots within this chat, so that when you create the the incident, that it'll also be logged in that incident?
You can't in this chat window will only accept text, so you can't cut and paste into that. Now, if you were to create a ticket from that, then you can have a rich text, field on the form. So, when I create that article, I can have these fields on my form created as rich text so that they could add and cut and paste into it. They just can't do it from the chat window. But if they're creating a ticket, they can. And of course, like we said, it can take it from the email and do it from there. It's just by default, this chat window is just set up to accept text. But the minute they launch into a form, if you want to give them, rich text capability here, then they can cut and paste once that ticket's created from the chat.
Okay, all right, understand. Can we touch a little bit on SLA tracking? So if, say, like a critical ticket is not responded, within 15 minutes, can it alert the team, and how's that set up?
Yeah, so that's done via your that same workflow builder.
Okay.
You go through and you build your SLA process, in those drag and drop workflows. And if I look at any one of these, I'll probably see this was long missed. Yeah, so when I look at any ticket, it'll show me up here what kind of targets I have. Number one, the response target is based on somebody putting this into an active status, right? So that's how that's triggered, because initially tickets come in logged. So until they're logged, this response timer is running up until the point somebody says, okay, I'm going to start working on this. And the minute they put it into an active status, that's considered a response. So then you notify the user it's been responded, and you can report on meeting that target. Now, it's not going to trip the resolution target until the status is actually put into resolved. So that's what triggers, that resolution target to be met or missed, as in this case. Let me see, I got to put my closure codes in here. Sorry. So that when I resolve this, all right, we'll just say, keep it short and sweet. So done. So that when I resolve this, make sure that's still in there. Yeah. It'll trip that second timer. Now, if within there I want to define those emails, that's where I can drag and drop the email escalations on here. So you'll see here's my resolution message that just went out saying, hey, this incident's been resolved. But before that, you'll notice the messages were going out saying you've reached your resolution threshold. Now we've escalated it 3 times. All right, so it started here, it's got escalated once, then it got escalated again and again, and then finally, we sent that last message out that says, well, you blew it. So you can define, within your SLAs, these little milestones, like when you want people reminded and what kind of notifications go out during that process, so that you don't end up with this, whether you take it out of the hands and give it to somebody else, or whether you just keep bringing eyes into the incident. Hopefully, it eventually gets the attention that it needs to get it resolved before you hit that breach. But that way you can define not only what your targets are, but then what happens as that timer counts down. And this is being driven by those workflow actions, just simply with a delay timer put on it. Instead of doing something immediately, it waits for 4 hours or 2 hours, after that ticket's created before taking some action.
Okay, got it.
And that's what, these values here are what you're pulling out, in your, I don't know if I showed one, but when you're looking at your SLA reports, it's going to show you those response and resolution targets to see if you're meeting. And see, I've got my chat popping up here. So that when you're looking at, go back to my dash, my report for, I think there's a couple on here for, service level management. So this will break it down by team, and give me those SLA percentages, for my response and my resolution, those two targets on the ticket to show me what I'm actually achieving. This being actual and these being so I can compare it against, targets that I've set. I want to be at least 90%. Hopefully I meet that goal. And you'll see down here that it breaks it down into things like services for you. So you can get granular by team, by service, by asset. Your SLAs can be assigned at different levels. So you can have SLAs by group. There may be an SLA specific to a particular server or network device. Those may be driven by, any number of values to give you a lot of flexibility as to how they get applied.
All right, understood.
Other question?
Nate, did you have a question? I think you had a question.
Oh, my only question was, I don't know if you had it earlier, was if that had a different theme or template, because that could be bright for some people. That dashboard.
Yeah, there are different. The admin has access to be able to change styles and color schemes and things like that. And the branding. So you can go in and play with these in this style editor, which will allow you to change. And you can see, go in here very easily. Using the default, but you can go in and again, you can assign those by role. So different groups may want to see things differently. So you can go in and set up one view for your, CMDB users versus your administrators, and be able to go in and change those color schemes very easily to something, very different, very quickly. Just going in and making selections based on.
But can you do it for, say Justin likes it, but I don't, can I change it myself, or is that something that has to be pushed through the group or the role per se?
Well, it does get assigned by role, but there's two ways you could do it. Number one, if it's not defined for the role, then they're going to get the default. So if somebody, essentially, what I recommend is everybody gets the default unless they ask for something different. And if they ask for something different, then you assign it to them and they'll get what you create for them. But everybody else will still get the default. Otherwise, you just create a role and just put one user in it.
Can the user self-service portal be changed by a user?
Only a user with that admin license. Everything in here is admin only.
Okay.
But you can see this is, this is the internal app and the internal views. This would be that self-service portal and the self-service views, right? So how that all appears. So, being able to change everything from the backgrounds and the text and the logos and, mouse over functionality very easily, all the way to branding and skinning the, the login page. So very easy to go in and, update, the logos, upload your own file and replace the Ivanti with your own. And again, very simple to do, to change the look and feel for different groups very easily, but no need to get into code. So there's a lot to it. What you're doing is it's not incredibly complex or difficult. It's just, there's a lot. And we haven't, scratched the surface in terms of what's even available, through the admin or through, Ivanti as a whole, going back and talking about, all those different workspaces that are possible, because these are all out of the box. Everything from project and portfolio management, which is part of the service management, that highest level. So just depending upon, what functionality you're needing, there's a module built in Ivanti for it typically.
I actually have two more questions. One is regarding, again, the separation between, say, like the facilities and the IT department. So right now we're using just one email address, that hits basically just one IT service desk.
Yep.
How would we need it to work with Ivanti? Do we have to have multiple SMTP addresses coming into each different separation for IT, for facility, for HR, for example? Or can we have one main email address, one main SMTP, but then we have, say, like aliases pointing to that one SMTP email address, and then can Ivanti, say, like in facilities, can they say, okay, when you see emails coming from, say, facilities at us.gt.com, then it would go to the service desk for the facilities?
Yeah, it would be the latter. So you're just going to set up in Ivanti, you're just going to set up one mailbox in Ivanti. So you're going to tap it into a mailbox that's going to be used for processing. You can take all kinds of actions on different things, but this is where everything's going to go. You'll just create alias mailboxes on your end that they'll email through that are all going to point to this one mailbox. And then you just read the header information to see where the mail came from, to be able to determine what to do with it from that point, whether it came from mailbox 1 or mailbox 2 or mailbox 3 or 4.
Okay, but Ivanti only has a field for just one SMTP address. Right.
So you just create on the Ivanti side, everything will be coming into just one mailbox. What happens to it from there is going to be dependent on, if it's coming from multiple mailboxes, depending on who sent it, which mailbox it came from, and of course, content in the email potentially. That actually determines what happens to it once it hits this Ivanti mailbox.
Okay.
That again can be figured through your workflow.
Okay, and then the second question I had was regarding, say you're in a in a case where you don't have a way to log into the portal, and then so you're receiving the ticket, via email. Is there a way to respond back to the email, to update, to reassign to another team member, or to even set urgency or priority for that incident via email?
Yes, you can configure any action coming in via email, where it's updating the record, reassigning it, changing the status, and you can do that with an email response as long as they've got, it's going to use this subject line. As long as they don't destroy the subject header, then they can respond, directly to this to update that record, so that, whatever it is, whether it's just updating, going into the description field, or, an update to the journal, or whether it's an update to status, those can be configured based upon, then you're looking at the response, right? So you're going to have to specifically, because it's always going to be maybe coming from that same person, but depending upon whether they want to update status or update priority, that's going to be something that they would have to tell you in the body somewhere, like that. Because it's going to be looking for something formatted just like that in order to know what to do. If somebody says, 1 priority please, it's not going to be able to determine what that user is intending. They're going to have to say something that you define specifically, so that if they want to update priority, they type it like that. If they want to update status, they say update status to open or closed, so that every time they want to make a specific update, they just have to know the syntax to be used.
Got it. Okay. And then if it has to be addressed to other email addresses or other team members, so when you start off the ticket, and then you reply to the ticket, initially, say like you had a CC or for 2 other email addresses, and then when you update the ticket, you want them to be also included. Do you always have to do like another CC, or does the Ivanti system already know that, okay, I remember that there's other email addresses, within the ticket, so when you just reply back to the ticket with the ticket number, it already knows that, okay, yeah, I'm also going to CC these other 2 email addresses?
Yeah, it'll know if there's others included, which it'll give me, typically if somebody's been CC'd, then I'll have, a reply all action, versus just reply. It's all going to depend on if somebody was included in the initial email. If the user hits the reply all, now if they hit reply, it's just going to go back to the server and leave the CC and the BCC out. But if the email sent it with multiple recipients, then they'll have reply all available, and as long as they use that, it'll continue to include everybody that was in that original email, just like any other email.
Okay, so compared to if you were to create the incident within the portal, right, and then say you want to add this person and this person, and then once you get that incident in your email, would it treat it as the same, just again as an email where you have to reply all? Or can you just reply?
You can just reply. The only thing you need to do is reply to the server in order to make the update. Whether you include others, or hit that reply all button is just going to determine if they see the message that you're sending back to Ivanti. But typically, if you're making an update, if they're going to receive those updates in an email anyway, it may be duplicative to send them the inbound email as well as then the outbound notification that goes to them that says the status has been updated or the priority's been updated.
Okay, all right, got it.
And again, those are to be able to affect those changes is just dragging another one of those email notification blocks into that process to add another email or to and be able to configure that CC and that BCC in that workflow action when you add it. So if certain users need to be on that list every time, managers or some supervisor, then that could be part of that workflow so that anything that goes out automatically includes everybody that needs to be a part of that notification.